Yeah, no, why don't we get going? I think interesting. That was a pretty good intro though for everybody.
Not too bad. It was like current events.
Yeah, so good. Welcome everybody. Momo, nice to see you. Um, yeah, welcome to another DeFi Raiders AMA. I'm Degenic here with Charlie Pyle from Hourglass. And we're excited to learn more about Hourglass. They provide a time-bound token infrastructure that addresses user loyalty and sticky liquidity in DeFi by adding programmability to long-term liquidity incentives. So we'll get into unpacking what that means and what it means for all of us as we go. So yeah, welcome Charlie. Thanks for joining
Yeah,
us.
man. Thank you so much. That was actually one of the best one-sentence descriptions of Hourglass I've heard. I might have to steal it myself and start using that to describe it to other people.
Yeah,
It's fantastic.
thank you. I can't take credit though. I stole it from somebody on Twitter.
Well, that's good. Memes do get around over time.
So before we get into the protocol, I always like to ask about the team and founding story, and I know it's going to might be a little long and complicated for you guys since this is really protocol number two, but nevertheless I'll ask the questions and take it wherever you would like. So who all is on the team and what skills or backgrounds do they bring, and then how did you all meet and what led you to decide to build Hourglass?
Yeah, it's been a real fun journey kicking off about January of 2022. So just about a year and a half ago is when sort of the founding members of Pitch and now Hourglass all met together. And it was very organic. A lot of us met just in different Discord and Telegram chats in the DeFi community. And what was really hot at the time was everything in the Vote Escrow Curve community. So that was right when I think Vote was released and Votium. And there was this whole suite of tools all built around these time-locked curve governance tokens. And we thought it was quite cool. And I was good friends with Sam Kazemian at the time from Frax, and I knew that they had just built a similar protocol with VEFXS. And a lot of the great ideas with Curve, I thought, could be somewhat generalized and they could be applied to other protocols. So a bunch of us got together. There was only 4 or 5 of us in the community. We built out a project called Pitch. We called it Pitch because we thought it was about pitching people good ideas. It was about governance. The gist of the system for people who don't know is that Curve had a pretty unique insight, which is that it'd be cool to give more governance power or sort of preferred voting rights to folks who are long-term aligned with a project. So if you commit to participating in an ecosystem for a year or 4 years, you should be rewarded by getting additional governance rights relative to someone who doesn't, because you're more long-term incentive aligned. And this is sort of an ancient idea. I think people for decades have been talking about, like, why doesn't Berkshire Hathaway have additional voting rights in Apple when they've been holding on to 25% of their portfolio as Apple for years? And maybe you want to reward a behavior like that. So Curve had the idea. It was great. We sort of applied it to Frax, and we called it Pitch. And there was a good number of us that worked on Pitch for about 8, 9, 10 months. And then the insight that we really had was that while the governance stuff was really fun, and I think still is very important and will be instrumental to the next couple of years of DeFi, what was super interesting was just the notion of time altogether, and that people who are willing to commit to an ecosystem, they're really participating in sort of this entire new domain. Like there's this fourth dimension of sorts, which is the domain of time, and it doesn't just apply to time-locked governance tokens, but really anytime you introduce time into a system, you can make stronger guarantees about the future behavior for that whole system in general. If you have $100 million in some DEX liquidity, you know that you can make loans against it for the next year, assuming that the DEX is also committed for the next year. So sometime around the late summer, a few folks from the pitch community, we all got together and started chatting, and we're fortunate enough to raise about $4.2 million in sort of capital to help build out this idea of time-bound tokens and how you can apply time to DeFi. And then didn't announce that we were going to be called Hourglass, but eventually the project sort of rebranded because it was no longer just about governance like Pitch was. It was about time, so it became Hourglass.com. And super excited to have just launched it a few weeks back. And yeah, I think there's 7 of us full time right now. I mean, the team is exceptional, at least the development team, and then there's also people in the community giving ideas. So it's been quite fun to see this thing finally go live and come to fruition.
Yeah, very cool. That's a great story. I love that when it's a community from one project that that get together to build another one that uses it.
Exactly.
Yeah, very cool. So it seems like we might do a little DeFi history, and I'm really interested, in your take on what I take to be generally well-known things, right? Your value prop makes me think immediately of Aave's, legendarily high customer acquisition costs across any industry, right? Or and then of course, as you mentioned, the curve journey with Convex, and then Vodium, and then of course Pitch. Um, I'd just love to hear your take on the how we got here.
100%, man. I mean, to be candid, I've been so focused on developing this system that I haven't reviewed the Aave history in at least a month or two. So if you have any notes top of mind, it might be great to just share that story front to back with the community, and then I'd be happy to jump in on sort of the second half of it, which we've really been focused on optimizing all of the time boosted governance and stuff like that.
Oh yeah, makes a lot of sense. And really, I'm thinking, just kind of the baseline Aave story of, boy, they were able to acquire all these users, but they did it at a cost that means that that they are fundamentally giving money to every user of their protocol, right? For forever.
Hmm. That's right. Yeah. Yeah, no, these it's funny because if you start modeling these protocols as like a traditional business with like customer acquisition costs, like they have a CAC and they have some lifetime value. There's really good ways that you can exactly line these things up one to one. Like if you wanted to model these incentive programs as CAC when a protocol emits tokens, that's their cost basis. And then if someone say commits liquidity into Aave for a year, well now you know the lifetime value of that customer. There's a lower bound of at least 1 year. So basically, with some amount of CAC, you can put a lower bound on the LTV, which is a very like jargony way of saying that it's economical. Like for most of these projects who have treasuries and budgets and communities, it doesn't make sense to just spend all of your incentives, all of your CAC, and then have everyone leave you next month when there's a new protocol that's going to do the exact same thing. Um, and user loyalty has been around for loads of time. I think most traditional businesses will have some setup where they'll pay you to either join the ecosystem, then they'll give you a referral code, and then once you're in there, if you stick around for a month or 6 months, you might exercise another referral bonus on top of that. And really, what Hourglass is doing right now is just trying to take that classical infrastructure and then apply it to all of these decentralized protocols.
And I love that you bring up loyalty programs because there's one that like airlines, for instance, right, are incredibly sophisticated about what they need to do in order to to engender loyalty, and what that financially means for them,
Hmm.
right? So I'm really interested in will this enable, and this is very theoretical now, but will this enable additional mechanisms of incentivization beyond simply yield? And is that something that you're thinking about in the future?
Yeah, so the example that I think about a lot is pegged assets. And the most like well-known pegged asset is a stable coin where you peg a token to like a dollar or a euro or some fiat value. But Sam's thing from Frax is that like these liquid staking tokens, these LSTs like Frax ETH and Stake ETH, those are also pegged assets. And even bridge tokens, those are also pegged assets where you have some asset on one side of the bridge and you have a liability sort of minted on the other. And what's very interesting about sort of locks liquidity and loyalty is that it provides you a lot of buffer on how much capital you need to have at any one given time. But I'll use an old example, which is Terra Luna. So everyone knows Luna, or at least most people probably do. The UST stablecoin got really big. I think at the peak there was tens of billions of it out there, and the name of the game was that if you put your UST in this pool, you'd get 20% yield. It was this anchor pool, and no matter what, you always got 20% on your dollars, which was way too good to be true. It turns out it was too good to be true. But what's very interesting is had Luna not been paying just a flat 20%, maybe they paid some laddered amount where if you locked your UST in there for a month, you got maybe 1%. If you put it in for a year, you got 5, and for 2 years, you get 10. And so let's say they had some program where the longer you committed your liquidity to the system, you got additional yield. Well, then if there was sort of wavering confidence in the system where people said, maybe we should pull out of our UST pool, they actually wouldn't be able to because they would have been sort of locked in. Because they couldn't pull out, they couldn't sell. Because they can't sell, it can't depeg. So then, because it's not depegging, people are actually more confident in the system, and maybe they continue providing some sort of liquidity. And of course, you can't run that up forever. Eventually, these sort of synthetic mechanisms do break if you turn the speed up to 100. But it definitely helps. It's a useful instrument that you can play with, and every hammer can break a wall. But ideally, you use it to put the nail in the wall and make the thing stronger instead of just continuing to smash the nail. So I think it's a very useful instrument that is still in the early days of being explored for helping pegged assets not depeg, helps buffer the liability side.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, right? And I love that you describe wrapped assets as also pegged assets, because yeah, absolutely they are.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm curious, how slightly off topic, so that we don't need to spend much time on this, but how do you see Frax and say synthetics SUSD as being different than UST? Right. I think of all three as having roughly the same collateralization mechanism.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I think the simplest. So I can't speak too much to SUSD because I don't know their balance sheet quite as well. But in the case of Frax, it's I think 95, 96. I think even now it's 97% backed by extraordinarily hard collateral, by basically either USDC directly, I think now USDP a little bit, and then I think a little bit also by the liquid staking tokens by Frax ETH itself. So they have really, really hard collateral, whereas UST was entirely backed by a governance token, Luna, which the mechanism for stabilizing it, UST, if it depegged, was always sort of doomed from the beginning, because if the price of Luna goes down, it mints more Luna, which only causes the price to further go down. So I won't dive too deep into why that death spiral happened. I think it's pretty well known, but I think Frax still had a great insight, which is that having just some hard collateral and then some buffer room provides you more flexibility than 100% collateral or zero. They were originally fractionally reserved, even though I believe they're going back to 100% collateral according to their governance. But the thing that Frax did really, really well, and it's actually one of the core reasons why they never depegged, is that a very substantial percentage of the total supply, I think 25%, was locked during the Terra implosion. And because all of this Frax was locked, it couldn't be sold. And that meant that even the protocol at the time was like 85% pegged, or 85% reserved. I think since 25% was locked, 100 minus 25 is 75. It had like 10% of buffer. It had roughly that much. And because of that, it actually was mathematically impossible for the thing to go under, at least at that specific period of time. So I think right now, they made it. They're back up to 100% collateral. But over the next year, 2 years, I think that this idea still has a lot of room to be explored on how you can have a more like dynamic balance sheet using locked liquidity as like your instrument of buffering.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense, right? That the amount of the fraction matters, and that the risk management of the actual project matters a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
So cool. So historically, projects have focused on locking up their tokens, their governance tokens instead of liquidity. But of course, this doesn't do anything to prevent bank runs, right? So then the flip side of this, is that LPing in DeFi is inherently pretty risky. So even stable coins, as we're talking about, depeg from time to time, and our safest assets are pretty volatile. So I'm curious how Hourglass changes the value prop, or if it does, right, for LPs, in order to incentivize locking.
Yeah, so I think the specific class of asset that deserves locking the most is locked LPs for like pair assets. So say that you have Frax ETH and ETH in a liquidity pool, and then someone locks that LP token. That's great for Frax ETH because it helps ensure that it's not going to depeg. And it's good for you because you're unlikely to take impermanent loss. You're basically only taking on ETH exposure, which you presumably already had from holding Frax ETH in the first place. And let's say that it's DAI in USDC, or Frax the stablecoin, and some other stable. The nice thing is that if the two types of assets, or more, 2 or 3, are not going to diverge because they're supposed to be like pairs, say they're pegged, then you locking the token is good for the peg because it's less likely to depeg, and it's good for you because you don't need to worry about taking on impermanent loss. So that specific class of asset is interesting because I think the biggest and well-known use cases for crypto right now are stablecoins. Stablecoins and like liquid staking are the two largest types of tokens right now between USDT, USDC, staked ETH, Frax ETH, Rocket Pool. Those comprise basically the top 10, top 20 tokens in the market beside the different L1 chains. And all of those are pretty much pegged assets. You either have a liquid staking token pegged to ETH, or you have a stablecoin pegged to some fiat currency. And that's the exact use case that I think locked liquidity really unlocks sort of parabolic growth from, and then also a meaningful improvement in the security of the token. It helps runs against depegs and stuff like that.
Right. It seems like, yeah, you're creating a virtuous cycle there.
Exactly. No, that's the hope. And I think all we really need is one or two protocols to implement this thing at scale. Like if there was something at the scale of Luna where you had billions and some amount of that was locked and some of that amount of that was unlocked, you can see very interesting dynamics between how people project the future value of that token. You know, say you have a 2-year locked version of this asset and people are using that as collateral for lending. They're using the locked token as collateral for maybe minting more of the original, or maybe they're just selling it on a marketplace. The discount of that asset sort of implicitly prices the future value of this pegged thing to begin with. So it really unlocks a new domain of design space in the crypto ecosystem, and I'm really excited to see it play out.
Yeah, particularly I'm interested to see if, if people will come up with loyalty programs that are more than just, plus X% of yield or what have you, right?
Definitely. Yeah, I think the most obvious example is a lot of these protocols charge fees. I think Lido has a 10% fee. And if you're committing for a year or 5 years, there's a good chance that you should earn, a 9% fee or an 8% fee or, 10% minus something as a reward for what you're doing. And then maybe if you guaranteeing that liquidity helps ensure that they have some staked ETH in like a Urine vault, and then the Urine vault is doing other things, like maybe the Urine vault goes into Aave. Well, then Aave is now grateful because Aave has a year of liquidity on that platform too. So maybe Aave can come in and also synergistically provide some incentives to sort of help the whole flywheel spin. So I think there's a bunch of different angles you can take to get this program moving.
Yeah, very cool. So you're currently supporting convex and frax time-locked farms and making them liquid via a receipt token. This is the core mechanic of Hourglass, as I understand it. So how
Yeah.
does this work?
Yeah, it's quite simple. I mean, right now, Frax and Convex, they have these different liquidity pools. They have somewhere in the billions of dollars of liquidity in them. And today, when you participate, say before Hourglass, when you locked your tokens, you had no receipt token. And now with Hourglass, you get a receipt token. And that's sort of the primary difference, is you just earn a receipt for this action that you would have organically taken already. And while that receipt seems like a pretty simple and naive thing to add to the system, that sort of receipt forms a new unit of account or a new Lego, and you can build things around this receipt. So the receipt is called a time-bound token, or TBT. And what Hourglass is now building is a bunch of infrastructure to support TBTs. So Frax and Convex are sort of the first example of a TBT live in the world, which is an ERC. It's an 1155 contract, if anyone's interested. But what I think is really going to be sort of revolutionary is all the stuff that we build around TBTs, because Hourglass eventually is just a platform, and Frax and Convex are sort of the first use case on the platform, but I think there's a number of other protocols, another number of other businesses that can use Hourglass to issue their own TBTs, and then all of those are immediately compatible with all of the infrastructure Hourglass has built for them.
Nifty, right? Yeah, I mean, this should apply to basically every protocol that, because pretty much everybody's managing either a governance token, liquidity, or both.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah, that's the hope, is that it's just a nice new primitive and it applies to basically anybody who has some kind of liquidity or loyalty program they want to set up.
Yeah, so then there will be a marketplace where users can bid on locked tokens with differing maturities.
Yeah, that's right. So the marketplace is actually live today. It's live at hourglass.com/trade, and that is currently live with the Frax and Convex stuff. And then the Labs team is adding a whole bunch of additional features on there with like our API and other stuff to make it even more sort of compatible.
Oh, nifty. So protocols will be able to pop this in as a widget on their own site at some point, I assume.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. They should be able to plug this in, and users might not even know that Hourglass exists. I think like the ideal state for Hourglass is really that it's just sort of this infrastructure behind the scenes in the way that all of these other Web3 protocols are just permissionless infrastructure. And whenever someone wants to set up a loyalty program, they have custom built smart contracts from Hourglass they can just set up, have their website point to them, and then whenever the TBTs are built, then the protocol can also have the TBTs either be sold or maybe even one day lent against on Hourglass 2 without the users maybe even knowing they exist. It's just sort of infrastructure in the back end.
Yeah, nifty. I'm totally off topic, but there's a project that I'm not going to remember the name of, but that uses NFTs to provide loyalty program services for restaurants.
Really?
It seems like you could basically do the same thing there, where you wrap this on top. So how long have you held the NFT for?
Hmm.
Right, becomes a factor in that loyalty model. I'll have to track down the name at some point after we're off.
Yeah, that's quite cool. No, and it's really exciting to see these things start to have real world use cases because everything we're building right now in Web3 and crypto, it of course applies to other crypto protocols and all the DeFi native stuff, but it is really exciting that I think in the next 1, 2, 3 years, sort of as privacy, as scalability, as usability are solved or at least made better, that this will start applying to everything in the world.
Right. I mean, and it gets me excited where we're talking about something that doesn't really exist in TradFi, right? There's not a direct parallel here.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that the primitive of being able to sort of appraise and then move around the value of time, it's just a general primitive that anybody could use. Like I was just having a conversation yesterday with somebody who they personally trade a lot of options, and they said that very frequently they have their option and they're like, man, I wish I could just extend the day of this option by like 2 or 3 days. Like I just want some more time on the option, or maybe I want less time on the option. But right now, there's no sort of venue where you can have someone price the marginal value of that time and say, yeah, I'm willing to extend the time value of this by 24 hours or 48. And I think that the ecosystem that Hourglass is going to hopefully curate of participants will be able to do stuff like that. They can just price time across any domain and then just plug in very seamlessly to all of these existing pieces of just applications and infrastructure that already exists.
Oh, nifty. Right. I hadn't even thought about the applications of this to all the different bond markets that are popping up everywhere now.
Yeah, I think that the exact infrastructure of the pricing time it works sort of in the general case. Like there's not just for the different loyalty programs. So the loyalty programs I think are what's going to be the very first use case that Hourglass sort of supports and actually has scale. Hopefully somewhere in the tens or hundreds of millions. Um, but we'll see. I mean, we're just trying to make something useful. It's sort of the team and the community is. And then if that first use case gets knocked out of the park and starts really working with a bunch of different protocols, there's no reason why it can't support all these other things as well.
Yeah, makes sense. Very cool. Well, so good. So let's move on and talk about security a little bit, and then governance and business model, and finally roadmap. Hopefully, if we manage to make it under your cutoff.
Yeah, let's do it.
So on the security front, I see you've had an audit from Arcadia. Do you have a bug bounty program as well, or would you like to otherwise talk about your security practices?
Yeah, so we just got the second audit completed as well from Sublime. So we're very excited to have two security audits now on the protocol, and a bug bounty is not yet live, but it's live in the next month or so. So bug bounties will be coming to the protocol. We want to do everything we can to keep it secure. I think security is one of the sort of core fatal flaws of crypto in the last 1 to 2 years. I mean, between the billions of dollars stolen and all the people whose lives have been hurt, it's hard to get real adoption when that kind of stuff goes on. So we're going to do everything we can to keep the protocol secure. And between the audits and then the bug bounty and open sourcing all sort of relevant code, that should go a long way.
Yeah, cool. What's your test process like when you roll out a new vault or support for a new protocol?
Yeah, so we have a number of fuzzers. It's a lot of just the classical smart contract testing stuff. So huge thanks to Paradigm for coming up with Foundry, to Georgios and Brock from Nascent, and just the whole squad who's really built such a fantastic framework for smart contract development. Being able to write test cases in Solidity itself has made the testing process materially easier. So really right out the gate, we usually have test classes running alongside it. And then the two different firms that audited us the first time, they're actually sort of working with us on a continuous basis. So we'll usually sort of bring them in to run any additional fuzzers, but the goal is that all of our code will start to conform to just a small handful of standards, and that greatly reduces the attack surface. So on the vault side, um, we're not really making too many changes going forward. Actually, I don't think we have any major vault changes planned. So um, the security there should hopefully be close to buttoned up. And then on the marketplace side, on the side where people can actually buy and sell these different time-bound tokens, we are actually built on top of Seaport. So we're just a very thin layer on top of an existing protocol, which is the Seaport protocol built by OpenSea. And they handle 1155, 721, and ERC20 trading. And I also want to give it just a huge shout out to Zero Age, who's sort of the founder and lead developer of that process, because he was exceptionally helpful in us getting built on top of them. And they're just so cleanly and sophisticatedly built out with Trail of Bits auditing them. So that's also helped a lot with our security background.
Yeah, very cool. Sounds like robust infrastructure.
We're doing our best. I mean, everyone's acting sort of in good faith and earnestly to build as much robust infrastructure as we can. It's definitely our top priority.
Yeah, it makes sense given the market you're going after. Every additional bit of risk, right, will be an issue for prospective investors.
That's right. Yeah.
So cool. So now let's talk governance. You're DAO governed, right? I assume that the DAO has carried over from Pitch. So how does governance work?
Yeah. So the community did carry over from Pitch. It was all the folks who were in that community, and there's currently a snapshot live for all the Pitch FXS voters. So, but the snapshot specifically applies to the FXS governance that Pitch itself was carrying out. As to the Hourglass DAO, or the DAO that sort of supports Hourglass development, right now that's all happening somewhat informally in the different Discord servers. So a lot of the different features and bugs that have been implemented have been directly come from the different community discussions. But there's not yet any formalized sort of voting process. That's definitely on the roadmap for the protocol within, say, the next 6 months, to get some sort of robust DAO governance structure set up to help sort of streamline development.
Oh, cool. So are you planning to do a token then?
So there's no sort of current plans, but sort of TM, we will we'll see. We're the community is exploring all of the best options to get governance set up, and there's a large number of them. So tokens are definitely on the table, especially if it's the best mechanism for governance, but sort of yet to be determined what'll be rolled out.
Yeah, it seems like you could also use usage of the protocol.
Exactly. There's a lot of different ways you can sort of skin the governance cat.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see where y'all go. So now let's talk a little about the business model. So I saw that you don't plan to charge fees at outset. So how is Hourglass going to make money?
Yeah. So the most important thing for Hourglass right now is just building something useful and then having real adoption. So before trying to figure out any clever business model, we want to make something that works first and that works at scale. So there's no plan to charge any fees for at least the next 6 months. And I think at the end of the year, there's probably going to be a DAO vote or some kind of mechanism to see what the path forward looks like. But right now, sort of the development of the protocol team is very well capitalized. There's about 3 years of sort of development runway for all of the folks on board. And because of that, the fees are going to come at some point in the future, if at all. And I think the places where they could happen, which would make a lot of sense, is I think about Hourglass in sort of the terminal state as a platform for time-bound tokens, where you have infrastructure for the time-bound tokens. So you have things you can sell them there. Right now we have this marketplace, and eventually you can probably even do other things on it. Maybe you can do lending and borrowing or some other sort of activity. And all of those different activities, those are sort of multi-sided platforms where you have some demand side, which are people who are buying them or lending against them. And then you have a supply side, which are folks who are selling or borrowing against them. And because of that, you could definitely charge fees on sort of either side of those equations in the same way that OpenSea charges fees or Aave or any of these existing protocols. So I think just having some sort of take rate could eventually make sense for the protocol if it wanted to monetize that way.
Now that's fascinating. I'm particularly impressed that you raised 4.3, I think was the number, without a definitive ROI plan for your investor.
Yeah, I mean the lucky thing is that if this market sort of scales, there's billions, if not tens or hundreds of billions of sort of time-bound token flavors out there between all of the loyalty programs or the different markets we talked about earlier. So the most important thing is that if Hourglass as a protocol is passing tens of billions or more volume through its just ecosystem, the path toward monetization is somewhat easy. Like if you have that much volume in the first place, there's only 2 or 3 tricks you really need to know to start turning on revenue if you need to. But if you don't have tens of billions of volume, no matter how many tricks you know, it doesn't really matter. So sort of the hard part is developing the network effect first. And then the easy part is monetizing it once that's actually running.
Yeah, I love it, and I totally agree. I'm just so surprised you got people with actual, with deep pockets to agree with that.
Yeah, we're very fortunate that sort of there's a lot of DeFi native and sort of crypto believers out there who really think that this is technology that will enable the next sort of era of globalization and financial rails, and that if it truly is executed and works successfully, all of the monetization should take care of itself.
Yeah, very very cool. So is it? Yeah, so I take it it's not possible for people to invest at this point.
Yeah, so Hourglass is not currently taking any active investment, but stay tuned as to how the protocol develops. I'm not entirely sure sort of what the exact capitalization plans look going forward, but at the moment, yeah, there's no open investments.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye out for a potential token.
Sure thing.
So cool. So what's up next? What can you share any of your roadmap? Do you have plans for additional asset or protocol support in the near term?
Yeah, so the roadmap is vast. We have about the next 12, if not 18 months of development sort of already planned out, and there's so many things that we want to add. So right now I sort of bucket it into sort of 2 or 3 different categories. The first category is sort of vertical development, or adding more features and just products to the existing platform. So one of those vertical features might be, say, lending against time-bound tokens, or if you had some time-bound, say, USDC Frax LP token, and you wanted to use that as collateral for a loan, making that even possible, using the same sort of infrastructure that the current marketplaces run on. So there's a lot of vertical features we can build in that domain. The second domain is horizontal. So that's adding other protocols and partners into our ecosystem. And right now, our list of partners who've reached out to us is unbelievable. I think we have almost 20 different protocols who've asked to be onboarded in some meaningful way. Everyone from the more like classic DeFi protocols to liquid stakers to stablecoins. And we actually, it's very hard to even keep up with the pace of folks reaching out to us. So we're actually hiring developers right now. If anyone in the audience is a dev and wants to help build this, because the scale of the protocol right now is just taking off. So the long-term goal is to make Hourglass a permissionless platform in the same way that Uniswap is a platform and OpenSea is a platform where anyone can create their own LP or NFT collection. We want Hourglass to be the same way. So other protocols, other groups of people can use us without even having to talk to our development team. But there's definitely a long way to go between where our infrastructure stands today and where this permissionless wheel will just start to spin. So if anyone wants to get involved, please join. And the third thing is not just horizontal and vertical, but it's sort of omnidirectional. And that is building multi-chain. So there's a number of different blockchains that have also reached out to us and want us to deploy time-bound token infrastructure. So we're probably going to scale onto L2s and maybe even other L1s in, say, the next 6 months, if not 12 months. So lots of different development to come. All of this is going to be outlined in the docs as well, docs.hourglass.com. But that's sort of where we're currently looking for the next 6 to 12 months of building.
Very cool. That is quite an exciting roadmap.
Thanks. I think so too.
And I love the idea, right, of being fully permissionless. Seems like the platonic ideal of DeFi protocols.
That's right. One day we'll all get there eventually. Soon. TM.
Yeah, very cool. So now, do you have any user engagement activities, or would you tell us a little bit about how you are handling community engagement and keeping a community together with a and caring about infrastructure?
Definitely. Yeah. So I think there's sort of 2 or 3 different ways that we care about bringing other people on board. The first is just direct community members. They're users like the Frax and Convex users who provided liquidity into Hourglass. I think as of today, there's something like $65,000 of TVL on the system. So we're very fortunate to already have a meaningful user base, and we're doing our best to keep everyone in there safe and sort of comfortable in the different products that or technology that's been built. So we have a very active Discord channel and then also a Telegram server where people can chat all the time. That's sort of domain one. The second domain is the community around partners, and how can we make sure that partners feel like they're being treated with the best of service that we can. So we're doing our best to have the docs prepared there, and then also have a sort of an onboarding section of the Discord dedicated strictly for partners. And then the third thing is, and this one is still pretty new, and this is people who want to build on top of Hourglass. So Hourglass itself is a platform, but I think there's going to be a number of folks who build different maybe index funds on top of Hourglass, where they take the different time-bound tokens and combine them into some group. Maybe they create some ladder of the different TBTs, or you might have some managed provider that is in charge of sort of balancing some portfolio of maybe selling or lending as the time-bound tokens as well. And all of these different classes of products like need to be built on top of Hourglass, because the TBT infrastructure is just sort of the base layer. So there's a lot of different domains between folks building on top of us, folks partnering with us, and then just community members using the product. And we're trying to have dedicated sections on all of our different sites and Discord channels to support them.
Yeah, very cool. I like how you laid that out as well.
Thanks, man.
Well, good. So at this point, should we open it up for questions from the audience? If anybody would like to get on stage, please raise your hand. Otherwise, feel free to tweet at us. I always feel like I should hum Final Jeopardy music while we wait for questions.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
But I never do it because no one wants to hear that.
Yeah, exactly. A chorus of Final Jeopardy music might be disconcerting to some audience members.
So looks like no questions, unfortunately. Any closing thoughts for us? What should we be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much coming in the different Hourglass community between all of the roadmap stuff and then the partners who want to onboard. The most important thing that Hourglass needs right now, it's not capital, it's not money, it's nothing like that. We actually just want community engagement and folks to sort of help us build. So if anyone in the audience wants to join, we're actively hiring developers, potentially even a community manager, some folks to help sort of rally the community around us, maybe some communications folks. The team is a long way to grow, both internally and externally. So we'd love for the community to get engaged if anyone's interested. And thanks again for coming by. This is really fun. Actually, I had a great time. Thanks for hosting me.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks for joining us. This was a pleasure. And yeah, thanks everybody for attending. This has been another DeFi Raiders AMA. We've been here with Hourglass, and this has been Charlie Pyle we've been talking to. I've been DeGenic. And yeah, we look forward to seeing everybody next time.